Northern Plains, late 1880s. While every homesteader raced to finish their 12 by 16 log cabin before winter, one Scandinavian immigrant stacked prairie hay bales 2 feet thick against his north and west walls. His neighbors called it a hay rick with a stovepipe. They called him careless. They insisted real cabins relied on timber, not fodder. He kept stacking, 18 to 24 inches of hay, creating a barrier others dismissed as cheap and fire-prone. Then December arrived. Temperatures plunged from 5 degrees to 30 below in under 24 hours. Winds hit 50 miles per hour, 3 feet of snow in a single day. Standard single-wall cabins bled heat through every crack. Families burned through cords of wood and still froze. Interior temperatures dropping to 10 degrees even with fires burning. But that haystack cabin? 25 to 35 degrees warmer inside, using half the firewood. 6 to 10 neighbors abandoned their frozen homes and crowded into his. What did he understand about wind, insulation, and survival that everyone else missed? If you value real history with lessons, subscribe. Comment your city and time so we know where this reached. The homesteader arrived in Dakota Territory in the spring of 1887 with a wagon, 2 oxen, and knowledge his neighbors would not recognize as valuable. He had grown up in coastal Norway, where winter winds came off the North Sea without mercy, where farmers banked their livestock barns with hay and straw every October, and where survival depended on blocking wind before it reached the walls. He filed his claim, cut timber from a creek bottom 5 miles west, and by August had raised a conventional log cabin, 12 feet by 16 feet, walls of cottonwood logs 6 to 8 inches thick, chinked with prairie clay and dried grass. It looked identical to every other structure going up across the settlement that summer. Then, in late September, while his neighbors turned to plowing and fence work, he began hauling prairie hay. The first week of December brought temperatures near zero and light snow that melted by afternoon. Families settled into winter routines, feeding livestock, hauling water from creek holes not yet frozen solid, burning through cordwood at predictable rates. The hay bale walls stood frozen and crusted white, unmoved by the wind that rattled shutters and found every gap in conventional chinking. Then on December 10th, the sky turned the color of old iron. By midnight, temperatures had dropped to 30 below zero. Winds rose to 40 miles per hour, then 50, driving snow horizontally across the open prairie. By dawn, drifts had climbed to roof height against every north-facing wall. Inside the standard cabins, stoves burned at full capacity, but interior temperatures fell to 15 degrees, then 10. Chinking shrank and cracked. Doors froze into their frames. Families huddled under every blanket they owned and still felt the cold seeping through. The hay bales absorbed the wind's full force without surrendering it to the log walls behind them. Each stack trapped a pocket of air, and thousands of these pockets formed a barrier that slowed heat loss to a fraction of what single-log construction allowed. Snow piled against the hay and stayed there, adding a second insulating layer rather than melting and refreezing into ice that would conduct cold directly to the wood. The north and west walls, which faced the storm's teeth, remained protected by nearly 2 feet of dense organic material that the wind could not penetrate. Inside, the stove burned at a modest rate, half a cord over 2 weeks compared to neighbors consuming double that in days, and the interior temperature held steady near 40 degrees. The homesteader could work without gloves. Water in a bucket near the wall stayed liquid. The difference was measurable, repeatable, and grounded in principles farmers had known for generations. Trapped air stops wind, and wind blocked is heat retained. By the second night, families began arriving at his door. They came in groups of 3 and 4, carrying children wrapped in quilts, leaving cabins that had become uninhabitable despite fires that consumed wood faster than anyone could split it. The homesteader made room without comment. He moved his own bedding closer to the walls, fed the stove at regular intervals, and let the hay do its work. 10 people slept in shift on a floor that remained above freezing, while 100 yards away, abandoned cabins stood dark and cold enough to kill. No one spoke about the mockery. No one needed to. The blizzard lasted 72 hours, and when it finally broke, every person who had sheltered inside the hay-walled cabin walked out without frostbite, without illness, without loss. The structure had proven itself in the only test that mattered. When the drifts melted in late January, neighbors returned to examine the hay walls with different eyes. By the following autumn, rectangular bales appeared stacked against cabins across the settlement, north walls first, then west walls, then any exposure that faced prevailing wind. Some homesteaders removed the bales each spring to prevent rot and rodent nesting, then restacked them in October. Others left them year-round, accepting the trade-off between fire risk and fuel savings. The method spread without fanfare, passed from neighbor to neighbor through observation rather than instruction. Agricultural extension bulletins published in the early 1900s documented hay and straw as emergency insulation, noting measurable reductions in firewood consumption and livestock mortality. The technique resurfaced during the Dust Bowl and again in late 20th century straw bale construction research, where testing confirmed insulation values between R30 and R40. On the plains, where wind mattered more than aesthetics, survival had always favored those who blocked the cold before it reached the walls.